Welcome, my name is Douglas V. Gibbs. This is Constitution Podcast, which is more constitutionally centered than my other videos. And I want to talk about executive orders, especially under the new Biden administration and some of the executive orders that he has issued. Let's talk about them in general. But first of all, let's ask ourselves, what is an executive order? An executive order is a proclamation, which is not legally binding, or instructions delegated down through the executive branch to execute the laws. Because the job of the president, according to Article 2, he has been vested with the executive authority or powers, executive power being the power to execute the laws of the country. That's his job. Executive branch, execute the laws of the country. Now, remember I said that an executive order is a proclamation or a rule or instruction delegated down through the executive branch. And that's it. So proclamation would be something like the Thanksgiving Proclamation by George Washington. That was a executive order. The Emancipation Proclamation. The idea that we have a National Day of Prayer in May. That's not legally binding, it's a proclamation. Proclamations are not legally binding. They are a proclamation. Let's do this. It's a suggestion. It's a recommendation. It's a, here, join me, I'm going to do it kind of thing. The other, once again, delegating authority, actions, rules, instructions down through the executive branch. George Washington, first president of the United States, issued a total of 8 executive orders. The next 5 presidents combined, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and John Quincy Adams, issued 10 altogether. Andrew Jackson, the father of the Democratic Party, was the first one to break double digits with 12. Then we start going throughout history, and we don't see anybody go over 100 except for Ulysses S. Grant, 217. He was a Republican. Democrat, Grover Cleveland, 113. Benjamin Harrison, 143. Grover Cleveland, his second term, it was split by Harrison's, 140. William McKinley, which was a Republican, 185. And then the first one to break 1,000 was Theodore Roosevelt. Now, Theodore Roosevelt, while listed as a Republican, was the first progressive president. He called himself a progressive. In fact, when he ran against Wilson and Taft in a later election that wound up splitting the vote and giving Woodrow Wilson the presidency, Teddy Roosevelt ran as the Bull Moose Party candidate, aka Progressive Party. So the first progressive president, the father of the Democrat Party, Andrew Jackson, the first one to go to double digits. The first progressive president, Theodore Roosevelt, was the first one to go over 1,000, 1,081. It was then that they started to number them. They had not numbered them, in other words, given them an actual executive order number until then. Now, it's going to get interesting in a minute, but let's continue through. The next one to go over 1,000 was Woodrow Wilson, 1,803. Then Calvin Coolidge with 1,203. His and Warren Harding's 522 were largely to reverse Woodrow Wilson's. Hence the reason for such a large number. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now here's a record breaker. 3,728 executive orders. Granted, he was voted in office 4 times, 3 and however many terms. So he was in office from March of 1933 until April of 1945 upon his death. So for 12 years he had the ability to pump out executive orders. So I kind of get why the number is so high, but also get why the number is high because progressive, Marxist, communist, leftist, whatever you want to call him, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was it. And with his New Deal / Raw Deal and his belief that the executive branch had ultimate power. Wilson believed that too, that if the president did it, it was constitutional because the president did it. The next one to go over 1,000, well, there are no more. Barack Obama had 276 executive orders, but I'm here to tell you he probably had well over 1,000. But what he did, realizing he needed to keep his number below his predecessor, George Bush, who had 291. Barack Obama was being accused of being executive order crazy. So they purposely pulled a maneuver to keep him below George W. Bush's number of 291. So Barack Obama's official number is 276. So what he began to do is the executive orders are numbered. Executive letters, executive memos, and executive actions are not. So he began to issue executive memos and letters and things like that to keep the executive order number down. In other words, he was doing executive orders just by another name. Like his, agreement with the Paris Accord, or with the Iranians. In both cases, it wasn't a treaty, it was an agreement, so we don't have to ratify it. Just call it something else, and suddenly you can get away with anything. It seemed like was the deal of the day. Donald J. Trump issued 220, some of which were to reverse Barack Obama's damage. Joe Biden, in 3 days, has issued 30 so far. And he firmly believes that the executive branch has authoritarian powers. So we'll see what happens there. Now, I tell you all of that to give you the foundation of what we're going to talk about. So we know the purpose of executive orders. We know the history of executive orders. Now let's look at some of the executive orders and actions we're seeing by, that 30 that we were just talking about, Joe Biden in the first 3 days. Prior to his inauguration, Joe Biden had said that he was going to issue an executive order demanding a national mask mandate, demanding that everyone wear a mask. Once in the Oval Office, he realized, maybe the people around him realized, probably not a good idea. After all, it is unconstitutional. The federal government can't dictate to us what we can or can't wear. Domestic issues supposed to be none of their problems anyway, but that's a bigger, broader discussion we'll get to another time, and we've already gotten into a few times. So what he decided to do was issue an executive order requiring a mask mandate for U.S. properties. All federal property, you are required to wear a mask by edict of the President of the United States. Here's the problem. Constitution, Article 2, says, and I quote, "The executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America." The executive power. What is the executive power? The executive power is the power to execute the laws of the United States. He may be President of the United States, but he is not boss of the three branches. We have something called separation of powers. He cannot dictate to another branch what they can or can't do. Therefore, the President of the United States cannot write an executive order dictating to all three branches, federal properties, that they must wear a mask. He can issue an executive order saying that personnel that are under the executive branch must wear masks, or that masks must be worn in buildings that serve only the executive branch. But anything has to do with the other two branches of government, can't tell them what they can or can't do. Separation of powers. He revoked the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. Why is there a permit for the Keystone pipeline in the first place? Does the federal government have the authority to dictate whether or not something can happen on state land? The argument is, well, Doug, it crosses state lines, so anytime that something crosses state lines because of the Commerce Clause, it's automatically a federal authority. Really? Let's pull out that Constitution again real quick. So I know it's a pesky little thing for some people. And the clause they're using for that is in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. And it says that the Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. And since they can regulate commerce among the several states across the state line, it must be either regulated or taxed by the federal government. The word regulate, however, did not mean that back then. It may mean to control or restrict by rule of law now. And the least used, number 4 on the list in your dictionary for the word regulate or regulated, is to put in good order. That was the number 1 definition back at the time of the writing of this. To put in good order, to make regular. In other words, the federal government's job is not to get involved with anything and everything across the state lines. It is their job, if something between the states is irregular, if it is not in good order, then they are supposed to get involved to mediate. And notice also that that clause is in Article 1, which is all about the legislative branch. So even if the federal government could constitutionally require permitting of the Keystone Pipeline, which they can't, but even if they could, it would be a legislative action, not an executive action. It would be up to the legislative branch to pass law or resolution, and then the president signing it. The president could not use an executive order to just, boom, you can't do it. Or you can do it. None of their business. Let the states decide what goes through their state. He proposed a 5-year extension of New START treaty to Russia. Because Russia was our enemy, is a Russia collusion. Until Biden's president, now they're our buddies, and we're going to extend that treaty with them. You know, that Obama done with them. He proposed a 5-year extension. This 5-year extension needs to be in writing, and then the Senate still has to confirm it. Well, ratify it, I'm sorry. He cannot, by executive order, extend the START treaty. It needs to be ratified by the United States Senate. And let's see here. Let me jump over here and take a look at something. He shall have power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate to make treaties provided 2/3 of the senators present concur. So, it not only needs to be ratified by the Senate, but it requires 2/3. This is in Article 2, Section 2, by the way. 2/3 of the Senate has to ratify it. You can propose it all you want, but the START treaty is not legally extended 5 years unless you get a 2/3 ratification from Senate. National Guard troops at the Capitol. You know, the ones that had to sleep on the cold concrete there in the parking garage for the U.S. Senate. It says in Article 1, Section 8 that the Congress has the power to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Okay? So it must begin with the legislature. Congress, both houses. Then it says, if we go back to Article 1, Section 7, every order, resolution, or vote to which a concurrence of the Senate and House of Representatives may be necessary, except on question of adjournment, shall be presented to the President of the United States. And before the same shall take effect, shall be approved by him, or being disapproved by him, shall be repassed by 2/3 of the Senate or House of Representatives according to the rules and limitations prescribed in the case of a bill. In other words, it takes a legislative action in order to call forth the militia, National Guard. According to the U.S. Code, the National Guard is a part of the organized militia. It takes Congress resolution to call them forward, and the president then must sign that resolution in order for it to happen. President Trump was still president at the time that the National Guards was called to the Capitol. Did he sign the resolution or the order? Did Congress issue an order? And if they did issue an order and he didn't sign it, did they approve it with 2/3 from each house? I'm going to venture no. Which made the National Guard troops being called to the Capitol when they were an unconstitutional action. Of course, the peace-loving, peacenik Democrats who, make love, not war. Remember those? Put the daisy in the barrel of the gun. Called Trump a warmonger, called Bush a warmonger. Remember those Democrats? First day, Biden sent 200 additional troops to Syria. So much for the anti-war Democrats. Executive order to re-engage with the World Health Organization. Association where we're having negotiations or talking with them. He can do that on his own. To issue an agreement that we will re-enter into a relationship with them, an official written agreement, it must be initiated by Congress and then ratified by 2/3 of the Senate. I'm sorry. It doesn't have to be initiated by Congress. It has to be initiated by the President, but it has to be ratified by 2/3 of the Senate. So he can try to re-engage the World Health Organization, but he needs 2/3 of the Senate to ratify that. It is the same as a treaty. It's an agreement. It's a foreign agreement. And from the founder's point of view, a foreign agreement is a treaty. I know these Democrats like to call things an agreement so that the Senate doesn't have to ratify it. That's what they do. Create eviction and foreclosure moratoriums. Since when can the federal government get involved in that kind of a domestic issue? Since when is there an authority regarding eviction or foreclosure? I don't see the authority in this thing. It's not there. That was an unconstitutional executive order. Ease the burden of student loans. Same thing. Where in the Constitution is there an authority for the federal government to do that? Oh, well, there's federal funding involved. Well, where in the Constitution does it authorize the federal funding to be involved in the first place? It's all unconstitutional. Rejoin the Paris Accord. Once again, they called it an agreement. It's a treaty. He better get Senate's 2/3 approval, because the Senate must ratify all treaties, agreements, whatever. Establish stricter fuel emission standards for vehicles, appliances, and construction. Okay. Where in the Constitution does it give the federal government that type of domestic authority? It doesn't. Well, Doug, founders didn't know about cars. Could have been an amendment. There's no amendment either. That's why the Constitution can be amended. They knew there'd be things they didn't know about. But see, the federal government says, oh no, we can just do it. Really? Where's it authorized? Show me. State emission standards are constitutional. Federal emission standards are not. And even if they were, it would require legislation. Again, executive orders are not legally binding. They can suggest, hey, let's have a national day of prayer. It can recommend, hey, let's have a day of Thanksgiving. It can even really, really encourage, hey, slaves that escape into northern occupied territories should be free. But executive orders, proclamations are not legally binding. They have no power of law. Period. Issue temporary moratorium for all oil and natural gas leasing activities in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. That's a difficult one. While it's federal property and working with Congress, can't do it with an executive order, he could issue that temporary moratorium. Once again, the order must go through. Remember, we read that, right? Article 1, Section 7. All resolutions, orders, so on and so forth, they're treated just like a bill. Have to be approved by both houses and get the president's signature first. Can't just issue an executive order. So first of all, based on that moratorium on all oil and gas leasing activities in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is unconstitutional anyway. But the fact that the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge even exists is unconstitutional, actually. the federal government took control of that property to, save it. Except in Article 1, Section 8, at the very end, it says that if the federal government's going to own property, it has to purchase it. Wasn't purchased. With the consent of the state legislature. They did it without the consent of the legislature. For the purpose of needful buildings. None of those three were satisfied in the creation of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So the fact that it's even a federal property or federally controlled area is unconstitutional in the first place. Regulatory revision restoring more than 100 federal regulations. That executive order is fine. Regulations are, remember I was talking about how an executive order is either a proclamation or instructions to the executive branch to execute the laws of the country. That's what regulations are. So the president can write an executive order to his regulatory agencies. However, they are supposed to be specifically regarding laws that are already on the books. The regulatory agencies are carrying out laws that are already on the books. If any of those more than 100 federal regulations are creating law, modifying law, something like that, they're unconstitutional. Once again, can't make law with an executive order, can't modify law, can't repeal law. That's a legislative action which belongs to the Congress of the United States. Halt funding for border wall, stop construction. Apportionment of funds can only be done by the House of Representatives, then must be approved by the Senate and then signed by the President. He cannot, with an executive order, halt the funding on the border wall, number one. Number two, the building of the border wall is legislatively in place. It's a law. And according to Article 2, he must faithfully execute the laws of the United States. Not executing a law of the United States is unconstitutional. Therefore, if he wants to stop the construction and the funding for the border wall, he needs legislation to be approved. To do that, then he can sign it. He can't do it with executive order. Unconstitutional executive order. Eliminate Trump's travel ban. The travel ban was executing a law from 1954 that allowed the president, if he believed that national security was at risk, to use executive orders to stop travel from countries he believes pose a risk to the United States. So Donald Trump had, even though the court said otherwise, had every constitutional authority to put those in place, and Biden, well, if something can be put in place with an executive order, it can also be removed by executive order. So that executive order, as much as I think it's a mistake, because you're inviting terrorism in the United States, is constitutional. All right. Counting non-citizens for the U.S. Census for the purpose of apportionment to the House of Representatives and Electoral College votes. Really? You can write an executive order changing the Constitution? Constitution says that only citizens can be counted for apportionment of Congress and Electoral College. Don't believe me, huh? Now, understand they didn't have illegal aliens in the way we do now, so they used language for the persons they knew at the time were not citizens. We'll get to that. The 14th Amendment corrected Article 1, Section 2, which also talks about apportionment, but in that clause was the 3/5 clause, and so now that after the war between the states, slavery had been abolished, the apportionment clause had to be renewed. So in the 14th Amendment, Section 2, if you want to read along, representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. Why excluding Indians not taxed? Because Indians not taxed were not citizens. Indians taxed were. Indians not taxed were not citizens. They were part of their tribe, their sovereign tribe. What this is saying is citizens get counted towards apportionment, non-citizens don't. So first of all, if you want to change so that non-citizens are counted in the census and used for apportionment for the House of Representatives and the Electoral College, which they want to get rid of anyway, it requires an amendment to the Constitution, not an executive order. Strengthen DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Program. 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause says that the children of foreigners and aliens are not citizens. Not in those exact words. Let's read it and then I'll explain. So the 14th Amendment, Clause 1, Section 1, the Citizenship Clause. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, and the word "and" means there's an additional requirement. So in other words, being born or naturalized in the United States is not enough. So birthright citizenship, you're inaccurate. That is an inaccurate interpretation because of the word "and." All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Well, Doug, that just means they got to follow the laws of the United States. If they're inside the border, they're within the jurisdiction, so it doesn't matter. No, that's not what it meant. Congressional record, which was called the Congressional Globe at the time, you can look it up. I'm not going to put it on the screen or anything. Maybe I should, but I'm not. But I'll give you the date. May 30th, 1866. May 30th, 1866. Congressional testimony by Senator Howard. Howard. Howard and Trumbull, these two senators, wrote this clause. When in front of Congress, asked about what they meant by the language they used for the clause before Congress would approve it, in testimony before Congress, Howard said, citizenship is granted to those born or naturalized and subject jurisdiction. By jurisdiction, subject jurisdiction thereof, I mean full jurisdiction, meaning full allegiance. Therefore, those who are not eligible to be citizens would be Indians not taxed. Oh, we've seen that before. And the children of foreigners, aliens, ambassadors, diplomats, and other foreign consuls and ministers. Therefore, the children of illegal aliens who have no allegiance to the United States, their allegiance still to the country they came from because they were willing to break the law to be here, they are not citizens. Therefore, they are not entitled to a Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. It's an unconstitutional executive order that Obama created in the first place. Of course, that program, he created law with his executive order, Obama did. And all Biden is doing is doubling down on something that's already unconstitutional. Increase the number of refugees coming into our country. Oh yeah, that's brilliant. We've been terrorism free for the last 4 years. Let's welcome the terrorists back into this country. Racial equity review in order to be more equitably allocate federal resources. Think about this for a second. A review by the federal government to determine whether or not somebody gets federal money based on race. Wait a second. I thought racial preference was eliminated by the war between the states. But yet, Biden is saying with that executive order, which of course is unconstitutional anyway, because can't have any force of power for that domestic issue is none of the federal government's business, but that's beside the point. that there is going to be a review based on race or transgenderism or homosexuality, sexual preference, whatever they want to call it, to decide whether or not federal resources will be allocated. Really? Well, this business is owned by a black gay man. That one is owned by a white straight man, so he's getting no federal resources, but the black gay man business is. I mean, was that what you're saying? How is that even close to being American? First of all, federal resources shouldn't be allocated to anything domestic. Domestic, our localism, none of the federal government's business anyway. But even if you could, really? You've decided you are going to determine whether or not someone gets money based on your rules of equity? Closing down the 1776 Commission. Because it's dangerous to know our history. Did you become wiser because of all the right decisions you made when you were younger? No. You became wiser because of the errors. Our history, good and bad, is important. It must be remembered. All of our history is important for us to learn and move forward. If you ignore the parts of history that you don't like, or in this case, projects what you really are, so you get rid of it so no one knows about it, what do you think is going to happen? Reinstitute diversity training for federal workers. President Trump got rid of that because it was racist and unequitable. You want to talk about equality? How about this? We're all Americans, period. What's with this diversity, multiculturalism garbage? Who cares if you're something or another? As Americans, let's do our thing. Oh, but Doug, some people have more advantage. I don't believe in that. White privilege, really? Well, yeah, Doug, you got white privilege, really? I grew up before my parents moved out to Corona, which is in the Inland Empire. I grew up in North Long Beach in the LA area. My dad had no college education, worked his tail off his whole life. Early in my life, my younger years, my mom was buying the cheapest pants, the cheapest shoes, and I better make them last a year. We're eating beans and potatoes because that's what we could afford. I worked in construction for 14 years. And I didn't get that job because I'm white, that's for sure. Most of the job sites I was looked down upon because I couldn't speak Spanish. White privilege, my butt. Work hard as an American. The opportunity's there. Is it tougher for some people because of where they started? Sure. Work smart, work hard, you'll get there. It's the American dream. This diversity, equitable allocations, all this, it's garbage. Establish new prohibitions of workplace discrimination. This is specifically including gender identity and sexual orientation. Because we want transgender males who say they're girls to be able to play girl sports and destroy the female sports industry. Make it so that your daughter can't even compete because all these guys are playing. First of all, it's sick, immoral, ridiculous. Oh, we have to be kind to the cross-dressers. I don't care if you cross-dress, man, but to the point where you're going to push my granddaughter out of soccer because she can't compete with the boys they're playing dressed up like girls? Besides, once again, constitutionally, where in the United States Constitution does it give it the federal government the authority over this? It doesn't. Oh, Doug, 14th Amendment. That's not what the 14th Amendment says. It's a misinterpretation. It says that the states can't make laws that treat everybody unequally. But if we want to have programs for girls and boys, that's our business as a culture. Ethics rules for political appointees. No. You know what that is? Make sure they agree with us politically on the left. Otherwise, the political appointee can't have a job. Unless they're hard left communists, they can't have that job because, that's, Trumpism is not ethical. No deportations. Release all current detainees being held by immigration agencies. Executive order and the letter that went out to ICE. Federal law says that illegal aliens must be detained, deported. So in Article 2, where it says that the president will faithfully execute the laws of the country, laws of the United States, he is violating that constitutional clause by refusing to enforce and refusing to execute immigration law as it is written. Now that said, gotta be careful how loud I speak because Congress will find a way to overturn all that immigration law. Here's what's funny, and I'm going to wrap it up with this. They are so afraid of, at the union level, people outside the unions voting in their union elections. So you must show ID, and they don't allow mail-in ballots. However, when it comes to the political world, they want illegal aliens in this country and given all the opportunities, privileges and immunities, as the Constitution would say it, that Americans have. And then more. How long do you think we can last as a country doing that? How long do you think, see, that's the point. They don't want us to be a country. They don't want us to last as a country. We are the world, right? Remember way back when they're singing, "We are the world, we are..." One big giant global family where we all just farm together and work together in our communities in a wonderful collectivistic, secular, communistic manner. It's going to be great. I predict within the year, by the end of 2021, the Democrats will have more than the 80 million voters for Trump ticked off at them. Actually, it was probably more than 100 million voters, but that's beside the point. They're going to overreach, going to overdo, and they're going to make the hatred for Gavin Newsom in California, who we're still trying to recall, look mild. Unconstitutional? You darn tootin'. More so than the last president? Absolutely. Was the last President Trump, perfect? No. But let me tell you, he was a lot more constitutional than Obama, Bush, and this guy. That's for sure. Thank you for watching Executive Orders, The New Era. Appreciate your viewership. If you appreciate what I do, go to douglasvgibbs.com or politicalpistachio.com to donate. Subscribe. See, that way, right? Down there. Yeah. So subscribe button. I'm also going to start putting these videos on BitChute and Rumble. I haven't gotten around to doing it yet, but I have a feeling if YouTube decides to play games with me, I'll be more encouraged to. We'll see what happens. But until then, subscribe to this page and my Constitution study page. Not sure where those are all at? No problem. DouglasVGibbs.com or PoliticalPistachio.com and hit videos in the link bar. And that'll take you to my page where I link all of my videos. Want to learn more about the Constitution? Find a link regarding what you want to know. And so forth. It's been great talking to you. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, and God bless you. Thank you for listening. Where we go one, we go all. Let's continue. Let's continue to fight for liberty by educating about the Constitution and working to return us to the original intent of the U.S. Constitution. We'll see you next time.